I got a post, and it's going to take a serious tone, and I know a lot of people might get offended, but it is what it is. It has to be said. First of all, here in America, Black people, African Americans, Africa being a continent, not a country, were kidnapped and brought here. Now, I say this because the Europeans and every other race or ethnicity under the sun came here on their own free will. Now, these people have flags. These people have culture. These people have beliefs. They fly that flag based on those cultures and beliefs and wars they fought in their own country to preserve those beliefs. People who might have even looked and could pass for brothers fought each other. All based on a belief. Racism is not a color. It is a belief. And the Africans who were kidnapped went through the Middle Passage, which is the transatlantic slave trade, did not have a choice. They were sold by their chiefs in Africa, was shackled and thrown at the bottom of a slave ship, packed like sardines, and brought to America. Yes, their chiefs sold them. You cannot go into a country. You should have learned that here in the Americas when the Europeans was getting arrows shot in their ass because the Native Americans put up a fight until they had to walk 1,000 miles, called the Trail of Tears. Basically a humiliation or a way to show other Europeans that they lost that war. But you cannot go into a country and just take people without working with somebody or people from the inside. It just does not happen. And just come in one ship after another loading slaves on there. You had to work with the people there in order to get it done. So you can't just blame Europeans for bringing Africans over here. You would have to blame their chiefs and the other African slaves catchers that helped them. Now, they stopped the slave trade, not because it was humanitarian, because enough of us were already being born and raised here on these plantations, was born and made a slave. To bring fresh Africans, and I say fresh as in their mindset. Yes, they're black, and yes, to be black in America was to be a slave, and to be a slave was to be black. By the time they stopped the slave trade, which was in the 18th century, 19th century. They stopped the slave trade because the Africans over here would have saw the plantation slaves who willingly believed that slavery was right and would have joined in and became masters themselves, because them coming over here free and seeing how easy it was to take over people who were made a slave would have been so reluctant. Because you got to remember, Africa invented slavery. Yeah, they might have did it for people who were in debt, had to pay back their debt, or prisoners of war, but slavery came from Africa. It began with the Egyptians. You read it in the Bible, you read the story of Moses, and it passed all through Africa. Africans. What is that? You have North Africa, you have West Africa, you have East Africa, Central Africa, and South Africa. When you say Africans, you think of a color. You think about the transatlantic slave trade. But Africa is full of many colors. North African, they are fair complected. The Egyptians, brown. West Africa, dark complexion, black. And then there's East Africa, which is right there by Saudi Arabia, which is brown. And then there's Central Africa, which is all mixed up. And then there's South Africa. Being an African American has always kind of made me feel alienated in this country, because I don't see people going around saying that they're African Jamaican, African Haitian, African Cuban, African Dominican, African Barbados. Why African American? Why not American? They were kidnapped and brought to the islands, but they're not going around saying they're African Jamaican, African Cuban. No, they just say they're Cuban. You want to say that you call yourself African American because you were kidnapped and brought to this country. Well, here are some facts for you. The majority of those that were kidnapped from Africa and brought to the Americas went mostly to South America, like Brazil, which of course they don't call themselves African Brazilians either, and the islands. Mostly about 80% of them. The 20% came to the Americas. Most of us came from the islands, was traded. We began our journey in the islands and then was traded to America. And the 20% of us that made it all the way from Africa to America, that was just left over for those who didn't need the slave owners, masters that did not need the Africans on the islands. They already had enough. And then they brought us here, or brought the Africans here. So, if you're trying to link your history back to Africa and calling yourselves African American because of slavery, in a country you believe you're now free in, just raise a red flag to me. It makes me believe I'm not really free. It sounds nice, African American. And if you want to say because those who were fair complected, who could pass for white, cannot call themselves black, when black is our core, coming from the West African coast, then what are the North Africans called? Are they called black? Maybe not. They might be called Egyptians or Moroccans. But they're African, aren't they? And if they're not calling themselves African Brazilians or African Cubans or African Jamaicans, why are we calling ourselves African Americans? Just to suit our complexion, our identity. When we're going to be treated based on how we're seen anyhow. You want to know, does that happen somewhere else? Does it happen in Brazil? Does it happen in the islands? You damn right it does. But they're still not going around calling themselves African, Jamaican, African, Brazilian, African, Trinidadian. No, they're just Trinidadians, or they're just Jamaicans, or they're just Brazilians. But yes, they experience the same thing over there, systematically and personally, judging people based on how they're seen. Slavery was not just here in the Americas, and the mindset, the slave mentality is not just in America. It is all up and down the coast. So before you call yourself African American, look and make it clear that you are free now. You are free and you don't belong to no continent called Africa. You're American.